This program was made possible by a grant from the Independent Documentary Fund, which is supported by the National Endowment for the Arts and the Ford Foundation.
This land is still a frontier. It is a shrinking frontier, where technology brings change and accelerates time. New industries are coming to much of Alaska. In this part of the state, men and machines have come to explore for gas and oil. South-southwest from Anchorage, about a day and a night by fishing boat, or 5.5 hours by car, whenever the weather's calm and the road is dry, lie Kachemak Bay and Lower Cook Inlet. In 1978, as part of its search for fossil fuels on the outer continental shelf, the United States government sold petroleum corporations rights to explore for oil and gas in 87 different sections of these inlet waters. This sale continues to provoke disagreement.
The question always arises in anytime we talk in a new community, and obviously Lower Cook Inlet is a community that's very new to the oil industry, even though 50 miles away we've been here for going on 15 years now. The question always comes up, yes, but how much oil are you going to spill? The answer is zero. We go to great lengths and great pains and great plans to spill zero oil.
If we go ahead and accept the intrusion of the oil industry in offshore drilling, and that's what we're talking about in this part of Alaska, the dangers are that this very river that produces salmon eventually is going to be extinct. We're going to have, if we keep on going, the spills that we've had in Alaska already, and Alaska is just opening up. This is a frontier area.
Everybody is talking this pollution business, but good heavens, I can't see where all this pollution would be coming from. The oil companies are not going to waste any oil. That's their lifeblood. They want to keep all this oil. They're not throwing it away.
We haven't had a real major tanker disaster on the scale of the Argo Merchant or Matula or Amoco Cadiz. And as the level of activity increases in the area, I believe that the law of averages increases to where an accident like this could occur.
There's no question that we would have a problem in picking up all of the oil in very high, very heavy seas. But what we do have is equipment that is the best available, and I think that's all that any oil company can do. And I think the key to it is that we have preventive equipment that we feel is fully adequate to prevent the oil spill in the first place.
We're going to fight it in every way we can.
Most of us tend to be most impressed with the big things that we see. The whales that are commonly seen here in Kachemak Bay and Lower Cook Inlet are impressive, and so are the seals and the sea otters and the porpoise and all the rest of it. But right here is where all this begins, right here in these tide pools. This is like a paradise, and this is really an interesting way to get a new insight into the marine productivity of an area like this, is to get out on your hands and knees and put your nose about an inch from the water and just sit here for a few minutes. It only takes, well, it could take a lifetime or it could take a few minutes, scrutinizing the individual things that are going on down there and trying to gain some appreciation for what this is all about and how it's working. I see kind of little bugs squirting around down in there, and the tube feet on this spiny sea urchin are distended. Now it's responding to the stimulus of my finger here. There's little crabs crawling around and tiny worms, and everywhere these byssal fibers that are holding all this material together.
Naturalist and guide Mike McBride and his wife built and operate this wilderness lodge on Kachemak Bay.
I mean, when you look at a tide pool like this, and you look as far as you can see down these blue mussel beds and down these protected intertidal zones, and you see the production of life here, you see the production of food, one can't be but impressed with the simple dollar and cents value of this stuff right here as food. These tide pools are just full of food. Edible food, good food. Stuff that we haven't learned to eat as Alaskans or Americans yet. People look at a handful of grass like that and they say, well, that's seaweed. But, I mean, you eat lettuce, it comes out of the garden. This is sea lettuce. It comes out of the sea. It's good. It's healthy. It's nutritious. It has lots of things in it that your body needs. And here's a sea urchin. And if there's one sea urchin in Lower Cook Inlet, there must be hundreds of millions. And in many parts of Europe and Asia, these are considered a great delicacy. And we've learned to not only like a little bit, but to like a lot the sea urchin and the marvelous food that it provides. The eggs taste like sweet cream. They're delicious.
We asked the district superintendent from Phillips Petroleum if the opposition to drilling in Lower Cook Inlet had affected the amount of safety equipment carried on board this exploratory rig.
I don't think the opposition has had anything to do with us having sophisticated equipment on board. Now, remember, I think Phillips has more at stake in this operation than the people in the area that may be opposed to our being here. We have a multi-million-dollar investment or commitment here, and we have more at stake than anyone in making sure there is no pollution, no loss of the well, and so forth. The only effect that I see that the so-called opposition has had on Phillips here is that the opposition has affected the timing, the regulations that we are obliged to go through to demonstrate that we are capable of handling potential pollution problems. However, I don't feel like the word opposition to oil companies is an appropriate term. I feel like it's more of an unfriendly indifference to oil companies. Alaskans notoriously are proud of their country, of the area that they live in. In fact, maybe the word country is more appropriate. They sometimes separate themselves from the lower 48. they don't want outsiders in. I'm generalizing. That's not always true. Whether it's oil companies or they even resent tourists or too many fishermen. They do have their own special interest. But I don't feel like they really oppose oil companies per se. They are concerned. I think it's a result of not being fully informed. I think that people that come out and visit this operation that we have are surprised at how clean we are in our operations. In the Upper Cook Inlet, we discharge water that's cleaner than the water we take in.
Kachemak Bay and Lower Cook Inlet annually yield rich harvests of salmon, halibut, shrimp, of tanner, Dungeness, and king crab. Fish and Game estimates the potential value of these catches at $15 to $17 million a year. On this morning run, the king crab boat checks its pots. According to Alaskan regulations, fishermen in Lower Cook Inlet can keep only male king crabs that are 7 or more inches across the back. Furthermore, these Fish and Game regulations impose an annual limit on the harvest. The intent of these rules is to guarantee the continued crab harvest in this area in future years.
Ready?
This whole delicate system that has evolved in this complex combination of factors, glaciers, ice fields, fjords, seals, whales, tidal movement, it's all a delicate balance, and it can't stand being tampered with. It can't stand pollutants.
People here disagree as to how much long-term damage this inlet would suffer if there were a major oil spill.
Some of the oil company officials have claimed that there is no long-range impact, but there are studies that do dispute this.
Probably the best studied spills have been at West Falmouth, Massachusetts, and Casco Bay, Maine, as far as the east coast of the United States, where there has been some long-term damage demonstrated there from oil spills. And probably the most notable one will be the recent Amoco Cadiz spill off the coast of France. Some of the preliminary results coming in there indicated extensive damage. Of course, there has been no long-term damage documented yet, but I believe that most investigators involved with this spill believe that there will be long-term damage associated with it.
Anytime that you have a really massive spill, for instance, similar to the big tanker spills, anytime you have such a massive spill as that, you have very immediate, obvious, recordable damage to the environment and the immediate vicinity of the spill. But when you go back and you look in retrospect at the present sites and conditions of those sites of the other spills that have got very broad coverage, the Santa Barbara spill, the Bay Marchand fire, the Torrey Canyon, and those massive spills, the Echofish spill in the North Sea. When you look at those spills and you go back and reevaluate the environment, when you say, is there any permanent damage, the answer has to be negative to that. There appears to be no permanent damage to the environment. There's nothing been destroyed that has not renewed itself. There's nothing gone that has not been rebuilt. And certainly those types of things don't rank with the holocaust of nature.
Atlantic Richfield, locally headquartered in this building in Anchorage, is one of 25 corporations that have purchased exploration leases in Lower Cook Inlet. Richard Knowles is Atlantic Richfield's district drilling superintendent. He lives and works in Anchorage, except when he commutes, on the road or in the air, to one of the Alaskan drill sites he oversees.
Well, when you talk about what's the greatest hazard involved to the environment, I think you have to look at the total environment package, and that is the environment in which human beings are attempting to exist on this planet. And when you talk about oil spills, on one hand, you have to talk about unemployment and lack of fuel on the other. And obviously, if mankind thought that oil spills were greater damage to the environment than unemployment and coal houses, we wouldn't have any exploration or production for hydrocarbons. We'd do something else. So I think when you talk about oil spills, you have to look at the total package. You can say you could eliminate oil spills if you eliminated the exploration, production, transportation, and use of all hydrocarbons. You would eliminate oil spills. I don't think mankind's ready to take that risk.
Ooh, there it is on the rebound. Oh! There it is. Oh, Jimmy Kimmel. Oh, that's got to be it. Left foot!
Guys, the puck's in my name. Oh!
There you are, Sam. Wind one up. Wind one up, babe. Get the puck, Sam. Get the puck. Ooh, ooh, ooh. There you are, Sharon. Take your time now, babe.
Hey! Why you got put the slammer?
You know, people always ask, why is it you enjoy working for a big oil company? What's so magic about all that? And, well, it's not really a big oil company. It's being part of a very exciting time in a very dynamic industry, and it's kind of one of the last industries left that where an individual can have a really significant impact on his work and his company and the whole state and area around you. It's because there's so many industries have a lot of people working for them, and the oil industry is one that doesn't have many people. We're kind of people poor and capital intensive. So when you get ready to go do something, whether it's just you and 3 or 4 guys working on a project together, and particularly in an area like Alaska, when so much of the area is frontier area from an exploration standpoint, besides being frontier from the historical standpoint. It's very, very exciting. There's things out there to be done that nobody has even described the problem, much less figured out the solution.
Okay, what we're doing out here is dropping these orange 3x5 drift cards. They're encased in a hard plastic casing, weighted with rocks, so that they float down in the water column with just the top of the cap exposed. This way they're not as subject to wind as just the plastic cards that we've used in the past. And we're dropping them at Lower Cook Inlet proposed drill sites. Depending on fishermen and beachcombers and clam diggers and other people that are out and around the inlet, to pick them up, to say, please open and read on the outside of the card. They're asked to fill out the information as to where the card is picked up, the date it's picked up, and any special circumstances involved. These are mailed into the Department of Fish and Game, where the results are tabulated.
Lauren Flagg is the habitat biologist for Alaska Fish and Game at Homer and has studied tidal movements in Kachemak Bay and Lower Cook Inlet for 3 years. Flying near an exploratory rig off Anchor Point, Flagg jettisons grocery bags filled with orange drift cards as he attempts to determine what would happen to the inlet in the event of a major oil spill from any source.
We've located basically 3 gyres that exist in outer Kachemak Bay and in the area of Lower Cook Inlet just outside of Kachemak Bay. The first gyre is an inner bay gyre that runs in a counterclockwise fashion just west of the Homer Spit. The second gyre is a clockwise gyre that is just south of Anchor Point and Bluff Point. And the third gyre is out in the lease area itself off of Anchor Point and is a larger counterclockwise gyre. And we get extremely high concentrations of larvae, shellfish larvae, and we're talking about king crab, tanner crab, shrimp, the commercially important species within these gyre areas of outer Kachemak Bay. Our concern with this is that if an oil spill became entrained in this gyre, it would act just like the larvae. The oil would go around and round in the gyre along with the larvae. And these larvae are extremely sensitive to certain fractions of oil. If we did get a major spill in that area, and if the wind was blowing in the right direction, or what we'd say would be the wrong direction, that would blow the oil into the gyre areas during the springtime when the high numbers of larvae are in this area, there could be some very, very high mortalities and very serious consequences to the fishery.
Here we are, folks. The latest in BVDs.
Biologists know little about the marine life of Lower Cook Inlet. As one man keeps watch on board, these scientists dive to collect samples. Their research emerges from an abrupt increase in scientific studies of these waters, an increase brought about by offshore exploration for gas and oil. Petroleum corporations who plan to drill here partly support marine studies, but the Alaskan and federal governments pay the major part.
The question has been asked whether there is enough scientific research being conducted in Cook Inlet at the present time to determine the effects of potential oil development and whether it occurred soon enough. And I think the answer to both of those is no. The research commenced within about a year of the time of the lease sale, for instance. Just a little bit over a year before the lease sale occurred. Biological work requires to get good answers requires a fairly lengthy period. You've got to be able to look at more than just 1 year's information to be able to make predictions. You have to be able to look at 3 or 4, 5 years or decades in many instances. And I think in this particular part of the world, things do occur fairly slowly. And the longer lead time you have, the better of a handle you're going to get. So the timing definitely is not, the work did not commence soon enough. The amount of work or the type of work that is being done in many instances has been inappropriate. But we're dealing with a more difficult question because it's very difficult to focus on exactly what should be done. One of the things, however, that should have been done, undoubtedly, was to, from the outset, try to get some handles on what the effect of oil is on certain basic types of habitat and basic communities. What is the effect of oil on sand? What is the effect of oil on the sand community? What is the effect of oil on the mud community? What is the effect of oil on the rock community? And at the same time, start looking at some of the dispersants, the effects of actually get on the ground with the various dispersants and check them out and find out what effects they're going to have, both short-term and long-term. With sufficient lead time that this can be cranked into the planning activities of the planning for development, production, so forth.
How long was I down?
40 minutes.
Not bad, not good.
Yep, well, you're back.
Collecting underwater samples is intense and sometimes dangerous work. Between dives, and before heading back to the lab where they'll analyze their findings in detail, these biologists relax for a few minutes.
That's a strange-looking little guy.
Well, I didn't recognize him right off. He's small. He might...
Yeah. Well, leptosterias all have 6, right?
No.
No? They some have 5?
Many have 5.
Oh, okay. So he is. Look at that fat belly. What you got in there, boy? What have you got in that fat belly of yours?
Oh, who hurt that poor little guy?
Hey, Bill, here's one without spots. See here, they're definitely between the tubercles. That's Anasidorus nobilis. If they are on the tubercles but not between it, it's Archodorus montereensis.
Okay, what do you call it?
That's an Acmea. Who?
Oh, yeah.
Who?
I know it.
Good. All right.
National
All right.
Hallelujah, we know one.
I even found an octopus. Woo!
I got a little baby king crab.
Can you hold that up?
No, hold that. Oh, no. Nobody's going to catch me with this.
I can do that. Really,
Turn the label around a little bit.
The oil companies, as a group at this particular point right now to Alaska, as I see it, pose a threat. We have something up here that the rest of the world wants. So Alaska is beginning to symbolize to other people as sort of being an outlet or a socket in which everybody's sort of plugging into. And what it brings, of course, with it is an influx not only of people, but of, I think, totally alien ideas to the way we're living. Massive cash economy is coming in. Aside from what I consider to be the environmental threat, it's both the cultural and social threat that we now have. Everything is based on what they call lifestyle, and our lifestyle is changing quickly, but I view lifestyle as being an economic term. I'm more interested in the way of life rather than the lifestyle, and that's what's being threatened, is the way of life. We're going to have to make some very serious sacrifices, as I see it, if we're going to accept oil industries coming in here in the way that is certainly happening now. And I, for one, view it as a threat because it's going to mean using their terms, the trade-offs, or what are we going to lose and what are we going to gain. The net result's going to be a deficit.
Heartily detested by his local opponents, greatly admired and appreciated by his allies, Frank Tupper has led fights against oil development in Lower Cook for several years. He lives, fishes, and works in the small community of Ninilchik.
Tout le monde jamais samedi soir. Tout le monde jamais samedi soir. Tout le monde, tout le monde, tout le monde, tout le monde, tout le monde jamais samedi soir. Everybody loves Saturday night. Where's my juice, hon? On Saturday night. Everybody, 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 everybody loves Saturday night.
I cannot for 1 minute sit here, live here, love here, fish here with the idea that my total destiny and the life in which I view as important is in the hands of a multinational corporation, a government somewhere else, or a group of people or a group of machines, or you name it. A good portion of what happens to me and happens to my community lies in my hands and my fellow residents.
Frank Tupper directs adult education at the Ninilchik Community High School. The job has brought him in frequent contact with the people around him.
Well, that's one of the neat things about living in a really small community. The most effective way to let people know what's happening is to go up, touch them, say, "Hello, Jack, tonight's wood-making class. I wouldn't want to see you miss that for the world with those cute grandchildren of yours." And he says, "Is that right?" And by God, and then he's in.
Where's
You coming to take wood and toy making? Oh, my goodness, women too, huh?
showing us the pig?
7:30, come out. You need some sneakers? Next time, bring them. Get in there. Looking good. I've certainly come to learn in the 4 to 5 years that I have been doing combat with the industry that I certainly can't hang all my hopes and aspirations on all the words that they either say or print. So the mere fact that the industry, sometimes in concert with various legislatures and Congresses, say, hey, we need what's out there, you're nothing more than an obstruction in the way of getting the oil for a consuming nation, and that there is a drastic need for it, and don't stand in the way. The first thing I think I would do, as being a radical skeptic at heart, is to question the very facts that they call facts. That's always in the eye of the beholder and the eye of the speaker. What to them is a fact, to me is a fallacy.
In most of Alaska, the only convenient way to get in and out of the places where people live is to take a plane. So few roads exist, and so many people fly in small planes, and the consequences of mistakes are so serious that a lot of Alaskans are killed this way, more than in automobiles. For those who don't fly their own plane, there's the taxi.
Can you take more there?
How many more you got?
2 more. How about 1 there?
Bring them both.
You tip it up on it. Tip it right on his hind quarter.
Yeah, no.
Then we can just spin it around. Now you need to get up in it and pull that in over.
Almost everything and everybody who goes to English Bay, the Native American Aleut village, travels this way.
The platform out there is what bothers me now. I just don't like that platform sitting right in line with the mountain there. If it was sitting further off from the mountain, I think we'd have a pretty good view there, which it used to be before, you know, before they set that platform down.
This Project Independence, I guess, really take the whole thing off, and we're just part of people who have to pay. The people in the East Coast need it, you know. They had severe winters, and, you know, they say they need the gas, and I guess...
Let's have them go down, take their shoes off, and put them down in that far... Yeah, those cubby holes. Pick up cubby holes. And tomorrow we'll have little kids come in the other door.
Papa.
You know, we only have about 3 people that are educated here really well. And 3 people that finished high school. And when we get run over, you know, these 3 people may not be here. And, you know, how are you going to understand what the paper they throw at you? You know, the oil companies. How are you going to understand the things that, you know, for a small village, you know, just when these type of things happen, you just don't understand, period. What we need is time to understand. You know, that you're talking a good 20 years. We're addicted to gasoline to run our outboards and plastic material, and, you know, most of the village has gotten propane stoves, you know, better cooking. And,
has that improved your life?
I don't know. I have to pay, you know, $80-some for a bottle of propane to fly it in on the airplane, while somebody in the East Coast would pay, what, $12 for a month for natural gas. And it's costing us $80-some just to, you know, it may be good, but you pay the price.
If you could do things the way you wanted and the oil companies were not here, what would you want?
I think I want to upgrade the living system and leave it basically laid back and quiet. You know, just leave it as it is, so it'd be enjoyed in a traditional native way. You know, I'm not going to say lifestyle, because people have a different point of view on lifestyles, and they look at them differently. That, you know, a way you live is... Native people are supposed to be quiet and laid back. That has been their thing in the past. And they like it that way. But so much social pressure has got them stampeding and yelling, you know. Take a look at the Eskimos up north, you know. They were quiet, and, you know, they opened their arms to the world. They said, this is the way we live, see us. Then you had your next generation saying, no, we don't want this, we don't want that, you know, we don't want to be hurt, but it was too late.
There's a lot of building going on here. If you can afford the price of land, there's lots of room left to build, even in downtown Homer. As a whole, the community is the most densely inhabited section of Lower Cook Inlet. About 5,000 people now live in the area, and more are coming all the time. But it appears that most of this growth is not yet related to the recent prospect of oil and gas. At a meeting here, a few citizens listened to Richard Knowles tell them how future drilling may affect their lives.
Yes, there is concern. Because one of the frustrating things about living in a small town, and when I say this, I say, because I came from a coal town in Appalachian Mountain Country, is that there's no way to get to the damn corporation that just killed all the catfish in that river with a drainage out of a strip mine. There's no way to get to a corporation that just drug a jackup in the middle of the night out through a bunch of crab pots. Okay? That's why we're here. Because, you know, right here is where you get to that corporation. Is the whole idea of being here tonight is to develop a dialogue so that people in a community of this size, and this is bigger than my hometown, people in a community like this understand what it is we at Atlantic Richfield, and I cannot speak for the industry. I would not speak for the industry. I'm talking about Atlantic Richfield Company. This is what we're going to do for the next 5 years, and if we're successful, look at Plan A. If we're not successful, look at Plan C. Here's how many people we're going to move in, how many boats we're going to have, how many times we come to get water, how many helicopters per week, how many people are going to work on the rigs, where they're going to live, how many new jobs you're talking about.
You take a big production platform that'll make 30, 40, 50,000 barrels of oil a day. Takes 18 people to run it. And there's 18 people on the beach. So there's 36 people, some of which are supervisors and second line supervisors and foremen and roustabouts and operators, and just doesn't take many people, but there's always more than one platform if you get in an oil producing province. So let's say the Lower Cook Inlet, let's say it had wound up with 5 platforms, 6 platforms, and each platform is about 35 jobs. So, you know, you're talking about a couple of hundred jobs, and it's real steady jobs. It's 7 days on and 7 days off for 20 or 30 years. You know, it's a whole man's working life. If he chooses to do that, yes, there's opportunity there, and it's good work. It's interesting work. People get very involved in it.
And if you have comments, or you don't like the way the crew boats are running, you know, or the helicopters are scaring your pet chickens, call me. I'm serious. Call me. Because myself and Charles are the people that are responsible for the line operations. Okay? We're not lawyers, and we're not landmen. We got any political aspirations? Excuse me, David. We're responsible for the line operations.
And say there's oil found at Homer, and say it's productive. Say you can do it, develop it economically, and make a return on your investment. The question is, what's the impact on Homer? What's that going to mean to people who came to Homer for a lifestyle?
Apparently, Homer's only source of income was fishing. In the 12 years that I have been here, we've seen a lot of highs and lows. The economy has been good when there's good fishing. It's been very poor when it's no fish or crab, I should say, have been caught. And this area cannot survive with its increased population with one industry. You've got to have more than one.
As they say, they're here to help us, to work with us, to provide jobs. The answer in the way that we live here, it's not all wrapped up in just bucks and jobs and employment or unemployment. You're talking about a traditional way of life for some people that have gone on for centuries, uninterrupted. There also are those people who have come to Alaska or who were born here who are not native but would like to appreciate and live in a sense of harmony with their environment. To have that all washed down into what somebody once talked about, the homogenization of mankind, perhaps is the biggest sacrifice and the largest sin I can think of that we would do, is to take all of this beautiful diversity that we call Alaska and to just level it off
and make it all the same. Make it stretch from southeastern Alaska, from Ketchikan, all the way up to Point Barrow in the Eskimo Arctic, and have it all become like one big mall, one big anchorage. And if we don't take some pretty strident stands right now, that's what's going to happen. Because what they've done in 200 years down in what we call the lower 48, it's going to be done up here in perhaps 20.
The Alaska Consensus, that's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. That's the ghost in the closet. That's a very nebulous term. The consensus on oil, it all depends on who you're talking to. If you talk to somebody in English Bay, you'll get one answer. If you talk to a fisherman in Seldovia, you'll get 2 or 3 answers, depending on who you talk to. In the communities in Lower Cook Inlet, there obviously is no consensus. But, in my personal opinion as a layman, obviously as Alaskan, and I came here to enjoy exactly the same things that the people in Homer came here to enjoy, irregardless of how many years they've been here, or decades, or perhaps, if they're lucky, generations. The consensus is changing. We're in a time of change. We're in a time of exposure. 4 years ago, you'd have got an entirely different answer by interviewing 100 people on the street in Homer than you'll get right now this spring, because it's been a period of readjustment. The people are beginning to learn and understand what people like myself and other people in industry really do, really are, really what we mean. I would say that the consensus is changing, but there's no consensus.
The same things that brought me here 10 years ago and people who preceded me here years before that are the same things that are bringing people here today. And it's the feeling that this country gives you when you're here, when you look at it, when you walk in the tide pools, when you hike on a forest trail. There's something that you can't really quite assess, except that one thing it seems that we could all agree is that if there was a road right here, or a store just over there on that point, or an oil platform right there off of that sandbar, that the feeling would be different here. And I think, and I think a lot of people would agree with me, that the same qualities that drew me here, that drew other people here in the past, and will continue to draw people here in the future for a place to relax, a place to enjoy, a place to be sensitive, a place to be quiet, a place to be still, a place to think, a place to refresh your heart and soul. Those kinds of things are products of this overall spirit, this overall sense of well-being that one is able to feel when you sit in a place like this and look at something as gorgeous as this area.
Bye.